Hi, I'm Barbara Kris.
And I'm Clarissa,
We're two friends, entrepreneurs, and experts in our field.
joining forces and talking all about life, business, tools for success, and more.
So, without further ado, here's to Dope Women.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Here's to Dope Women, where today we are going to cover the 5 ways to get over imposter syndrome, which I think everybody at one point in time has felt it. My name is Clarissa, and here's my beautiful co-host, Barbara Kris.
Hey, how are you, girl?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I think I just yelled in your ear, though.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
Excited about this topic because, man, this is a good one. And I know that probably everybody can relate to this for sure.
Definitely. I feel like it's definitely something that has happened to probably everybody, but doesn't really get talked about.
Yeah. I
Right?
think it's because it can be shameful to admit some of these things. It can be embarrassing. It can make you feel like you're kind of a loser, a failure, or something like that.
Yeah.
And first of all, let me just open up. I think this is the tough thing. A lot of times people will know what a word is, but then if you ask them, okay, define it back for me. What is imposter syndrome? Most people are like, well, I know what it means, but I can't really put it into words. So I'm going to read a definition.
Okay.
And then kind of get your feedback on this. So
Great.
basically, imposter syndrome is that basically it's people with imposter syndrome doubt their achievements and ability and fear that they might be seen as a fraud. So like, in other words, they just have this belief, this inability to really see their own success as something that they deserve or they legitimately achieved. And so they constantly feel like they're going to be found out, like there's some kind of a fake or a fraud, that they just don't really deserve any of that. Isn't that crazy?
It's so weird. It's like I heard yesterday, it's a form of intellectual self-doubt. Right. So it's like
Ooh.
you could be in a room full of other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. And
Mhm.
for some reason, you might feel like an imposter, like you shouldn't be in this room.
Oh, I love how you said that because I feel like you can picture that, right? You can
Right.
actually picture yourself being in a room, and I know we've all been there. I have been there. I have absolutely have been there. You're in this room and you're just thinking, "Oh my gosh, like why am I here? I'm like so out of my league right now."
Yeah. But I think that we should really kind of get the point across that this is a very normal feeling.
Mhm.
It's definitely something that you can work on, but I
Mhm.
think that as long as you're growing, it's something that you're always going to be constantly kind of feeling. It's always going to be something that's going to kind of pop up in your mind of like, oh gosh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, who am I to be getting into this? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah.
I think as long as you're growing and you're learning new things,
Mhm.
you're always going to feel it. And so it's just a matter of kind of getting over that. So that's why we wanted to give you guys at the end of this episode, we wanted to give you guys 5 tips,
Mhm.
5 ways to try and get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great because I think a lot of times we do, we don't want to be just talking heads, just to talk about information just for the sake of talking about it. I know that you and I, even with us just as being friends and then business partners and, co-hosts on the show, but it's really to provide help and assistance to people, right? So yeah, we want to talk about this and really put it out there as far as that, like you said, it's not something to be ashamed of and that it's really common. In fact, they even talk about how this can be, sometimes it can be a temporary thing. Sometimes it can be a lifelong thing. And like you said, maybe it really is dependent on like your own situation. But bottom line is that you can work through it. You can get past it and we're going to be here and we're here to help you do that.
Yes. Yeah. Because even people, I was watching a TED talk yesterday because I don't know why, but this specific topic was just very interesting to me. So I was like looking up TED Talks and other
Yeah.
podcasts talking about it. And even people like Maya Angelou and Albert Einstein had said, or, written down at some point that they felt like an imposter. And it's
Oh my
like,
gosh,
people who
right?
are just like brilliant geniuses
Hmm.
have felt like that. So I think this episode can relate to anybody.
Yeah. So did you know, like I had to look this up because when I looked up the whole thing about imposter syndrome, I was like, well, when this like when did people start talking about this? And there's actually the first time where it's documented at least, is that there was a study done 1978. That is the first time that this was kind of brought to the surface. But at the time, it was mentioned as imposter phenomenon, and that was out of the Georgia State University. So 1978, they started talking about this. And this particular study, they were actually looking at these high achieving women, and that it was really common, within this kind of cohort of people, that this type of, like you said, kind of like this syndrome, this belief, or maybe it's self-doubt of kind of questioning their ability to be what it is that they want to be, if that makes sense. But 1978, and it was a trip because I'm thinking, wow, I feel like I've just been recently hearing about it, as kind of like people talking about it online, on social media and things like that. But, they've been looking at it for a long time.
Yeah. And it's probably something that everybody felt at some point in time, well before 1978, but it wasn't until 1978 is when people actually started recognizing it as, it's not even like a syndrome. It's not an illness, but it's like something that's very prevalent, and something that, hey, maybe we should research this.
Yeah. It's like a thing. Like enough people are experiencing this, like, hey, this is kind of like interesting that, hey, we're all kind of dealing with a similar type of self-doubt and, stuff like that. Like, maybe this is something. So speaking of that, let's get into some of this. Yeah. How about you? Like, I know we wanted to both share our stories about imposter syndrome, but what about you? What is for you, when you think about it, one of the biggest hurdles that you had to go through or work through with respect to this? What was that for you?
I mean, I think just when I first started my career, I had graduated beauty school. A week later, I took my state board and I got my license. And when you're in beauty school, you are working on clients. Like, you were actually coming to me when I was in beauty school. Yeah. So, yes, I had been taking clients. I wasn't getting paid for it. I think we just accepted tips or something. But usually what hairstylists do is they go right into assisting. And then, so they're still a student learning under another hairstylist. Yeah. And then eventually they start taking, their own clients. For me, I did not do that. I just threw myself right into working in a salon. Mm-hmm. So, I started working at a salon. I started, there was a lot of walk-ins. So then I would just start taking, and it's like, I remember my very first client was like a guy, and it's like, he had like this undercut where it was like really long on top, and then like underneath, he just wanted this like shaved. And so luckily I had, worked on guys, while I was in beauty school. A lot of guys go in there because they want like cheap $5 haircuts.
That's a dig to the guys, right?
They're like, yeah, they're like, whatever, we'll just have, this $5 haircut because men are cheap. So yeah. And I remember being so nervous, and I remember going, please don't ask me like how long I've been doing this, because you're literally my first client. Yes. And it was it took me like about, I would say 6 months of taking clients. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was working 2 jobs, but I want to say I was doing hair probably at least 4 or 5 days a week. Wow. And yeah, it probably took me about 6 months to actually feel like, oh, wow, okay, so I'm like an actual hairstylist.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And people would see, and I mean, I've always, like, not to brag, but I've always looked very young for my age. So I even had people who would look at me and who would see how young I was. Right. Yeah. Even though, like, I mean, I was 25 and someone asked me like what high school I went to. Like, I was like, what are you like? What? But they would see how young I was, and they wouldn't want to go to me because they didn't think that, I could do good hair.
Right. Oh, so yeah. They question your credibility.
Exactly.
Or your expertise, whatever.
Exactly. So it really wasn't until I started building my skill and building my, speed and really kind of getting into the swing of things was when I kind of got over that imposter syndrome and actually truly believed, oh, wow, I'm actually a hairstylist. Like, this is what I do for a living. For a long time, I was just like, oh, well, I mean, I just started like doing hair. So, and it's like, yeah. So that was probably that. And then when I started my business, when I actually, because I kind of threw myself into it, it was kind of like an opportunity that I really just was like, I have to take this opportunity. Otherwise, I could miss out on it. And so, I'd worked in a big salon, and
Hmm.
even though when you're a hairstylist, you're definitely an independent contractor, right?
Hmm.
You're an entrepreneur. I still would, call the salon owner like, oh, she's my boss. Like I still felt like I worked for someone.
Right.
So when I started my own business and I was working really truly for myself and myself only, and there was no
Yeah.
expectations from a salon, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like taxes and this and that and inventory, and how do I keep track of this, and how do I
Yeah.
business license and
You're like, what the
EIN
hell?
number and my license and seller's permit. What? Like, what do I do?
You're like,
So
no, no, thanks.
yeah, so definitely, I think just me, whenever I've started to be a beginner at something, that's
Hmm.
when I really truly got those feelings of like, oh my gosh. And even still to this day, it isn't until people actually are like, wow, like, look at your salon. It's so cute and this and that. And I'm like, oh yeah,
Oh,
huh?
right.
This is mine. Yeah, I guess
Is it?
it's cute in here. So it's even still to this day, I think I still have
Yeah.
those feelings.
I think it's such an interesting thing how a lot of times that external validation, all of a sudden it's like this, when you hear it enough, you're like, oh yeah, I guess this is pretty cool that I have my own spot, my own salon. I guess it is
Yeah.
pretty damn, decorated nice and it's cozy here and people love coming to me. Like, how did I not see that off the bat?
Yeah.
Thus the whole imposter syndrome phenomenon, whatever, that it's like in full effect. Like you said, like we all, I think at some point or another, have suffered or dealt with it. I should say dealt with it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like though, even though I haven't had a huge, like, I mean, I've been doing hair for 10 years now,
Oh my
right?
God.
And I haven't had like a huge career change like you have.
Hmm.
So, did you go through any of those feelings when you switched your careers?
Oh my God. You know what? First of all, I will say, hell yes, I did.
Yeah.
And at the same time, because it was such a big switch, I have a big lesson that I learned that I want to share with everyone listening. So first of all, yes, I 100% had imposter syndrome. I remember I left aerospace. So for those people who aren't or who aren't don't know, I was in aerospace for nearly 20 years. And so in the corporate world, I dealt with, I worked in, environmental and occupational health. So I was dealing with a lot of employee health and things like that, regulations and stuff like that. And then I took that experience in dealing with, health from a more employee health type perspective. And I took it to a whole other level with nutrition and dealing with people more one-on-one and dealing with personal health and really what I wanted to do. But still, it was like this huge gap, this huge jump from one thing to another. And I remember feeling like when I was, getting into nutrition and getting into coaching, that I felt like I couldn't ever mention the fact that I was in aerospace, that in my head, it made it feel like, okay, if they knew I worked in aerospace and I wasn't in nutrition for a gazillion years, right? That somehow that would make me look less credible, less informed, less anything, right? Less any kind of respectful professional or respected professional. Because I went from that one career in aerospace where I felt extremely respected and I paid my dues and all that. But then it was like I had to like draw the line and like, no, I'm a nutritionist now. I can't ever talk about that.
Mm.
Totally felt like if anything came from the aerospace world into the nutrition side, that it was my undoing, which is
Hmm.
it's crazy because kind of like what you were sharing with like with you with your salon and people would tell you this place is great and oh my gosh and you're so good at what you do. It wasn't until finally when people I would talk to them and they would be like, "What? Like you did what before nutrition?" And they were like, "How come you never talk about that? That's amazing. That you should be sharing that experience and kind of like wrapping that into what you do," which I was doing already. I just wasn't broadcasting it. They were like, what the hell? That is a great story and a great part of what makes you unique. And so I guess the lesson from that for people who are listening, that whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a career change or what have you, your experience has brought you to where you are today. And that it's really, I think, our makes us powerful to embrace that and to really turn it into a story of power for us. And I would say that that hasn't been until the last several years for me that I've done that. I'm like 50 years old. And so I guess what you're saying, like this is something that you're constantly evolving and working through depending on what's going on in your life. And so this imposter syndrome from a, total, I mean, the engineers will get it, but a total like, engineering geek, and I totally was. And going into a nutrition profession where I'm dealing with, people one-on-one and with groups and, talking and trying to be a lot more, I guess vibrant of a personality versus being in engineering in a cubicle.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had a really, I guess kind of growth from that and really step out of a lot of things that I thought I was and expand on that. I really had to just like break those barriers. It was, and it wasn't easy. It was hard for sure.
Definitely. It's almost like a complete like your whole character in life changes,
Yes.
right? Like the person
Mhm.
that you tell yourself that you are, the person that you are, when you're
Mhm.
going into a completely different career, it's almost
Mhm.
like your character in life now is like morphing into something else. And you're just kind of like, oh my God, you're just
Yeah.
going through those changes.
Mhm.
Yeah. But
It
that's why I think that it's so important to talk to other people about it too, because
Mhm.
there's something called, I was listening to something yesterday. It's called pluralistic ignorance, which basically means that you are kind of like you're doubting yourself in your head, um, and you believe that you're alone in all of
Oh.
these doubts. So, and then, but you don't realize that all these other people around you probably have either those same doubts or those same feelings about, say you're in your cubicle and then
Mm.
you're all working on maybe one project and you're really frustrated by how hard it's going. But you're not saying it to anybody else. You just kind of think that you're alone in it. That's called
Mhm.
pluralistic ignorance. And it's basically meaning that you don't realize how many other people around you feel the same way and you just feel alone in it.
Mhm.
So I think that's why it's so important to talk to people
Wow.
about it, because you say like, gosh, sometimes I'm like, gosh, I'm so slow today. And then my coworker will be like, oh my gosh, me too. Or I'm so slow this week. And I'm like, dude, me too. How come? Like, oh, maybe it's because
Yeah.
right after a holiday or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, that's why it's super important.
No, I think that's huge because that was one of the things I remember when I first got into the whole entrepreneurial world. I think I mentioned this to you too. I was like, being an entrepreneur can be one of the like loneliest things because I believe a lot of times we suffer from imposter syndrome, right? Because if we were to ask for help or like mention to like a respected, coworker or something like that, or someone like a business partner or something like that, right? Like it's a colleague, that somehow it makes you look less than. Like, because
Yeah.
you're afraid to say, oh gosh, I'm really struggling right now. I'm slow or I can't get any new clients or what have you. And the fear is that they're going to be like, well, I'm like, I'm balling. Like I have no issue. Then you feel like, oh man, then something's wrong with me. And that
Yeah.
was like stupid that I put it out there like that. Yeah, that's legit right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
did
almost,
you did you talk to people about things? Did you find that easy or was it hard for you?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have anybody else to talk to.
Oh no.
I really didn't, right? Because I left the other salon. Like when I started my business, I left the other salon. It's not like I could
Hmm.
go back to the salon owner previously. I mean, if anything, I learned more of what not to do as a salon owner from her. Like, unfortunately, sorry to say that, but it's almost like I learned like what not to do rather than what to do. So,
Hmm.
unfortunately, in a way, I didn't really have a whole lot of mentors. It wasn't until later on when I really got into more personal development and started taking more classes and things like that to kind of grow is when I was
Right.
like, oh, okay, cool. Like
Yeah.
I'm learning and I'm growing. And I mean, at that point, I had already been doing hair for like what, 8 years at that point. So
Yeah.
I was already confident in my skill level as a hairstylist. I just needed to build my skill level as a business owner.
Oh, that's money right there.
Yeah.
That's money right there. I mean, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off, but that is like,
No, that's just, I mean, I think that that's with anything though,
yep.
anytime that you're learning something new, anytime that you are getting out of your comfort zone,
Hmm.
I think that imposter syndrome is going to come up.
Hmm.
And it's really just all about how you deal with it, right? Like if you're in a big room full of, say, if you're in a room full of high achieving people,
Yeah.
right? You say you make, $100,000 a year and you're in a room full of people who make $1 million a year. Say
Yeah.
if you're in the same industry, but you're over here making 100K and
Mhm.
you're in a room full of people who make $1 million a year, you're
Yeah.
going to feel like an imposter. I feel like anybody
Oh
going into
yeah.
that room making $100,000 is going to feel that way. But
Yep.
it's either you can let it get you down by saying, all these people are smarter than me. I have no
Mhm.
idea what I'm doing because I'm making less. Or
Mhm.
you can look at it in a positive way by looking at them and going, huh, what are they doing that I'm not? And it kind of goes
Yeah.
back to our comparison um, episode where
Mhm.
it's like, you can't be comparing yourselves to all the other people in the room. You really can, and feeling like an imposter, you need to look at these people and say, okay, what do I need to learn from them
Yeah.
to get to that level?
Yep. It's really interesting too is that when I left the corporate world, actually my first business that I kind of like created was activewear. That was like my first thing that I did. And I really at the time and I still am. I still love the whole activewear and the fashion aspect of, fitness and all of that stuff. But I remember in the process of me building this business, I was also, competing in the bikini division of bodybuilding. And so I met through my coach, I met a lot of people who had their own businesses. They were entrepreneurs. And I think what opened my eyes for me was that when I got to know them, they were really open with sharing, okay, they might have a successful business right now, but this wasn't their first like rodeo. This wasn't their first, business. They probably had two, three. I mean, they were like years in. And I think like when you said it's important to talk to people because it made me feel like, okay, it's okay that I'm struggling. I'm really trying to understand, marketing. I'm trying to understand what's my position, what does my brand say about me? Like I had no idea about any of that stuff. And they did, but they were telling me and sharing with me that, hey, this is something that you're gonna learn. You just have to keep going. And the thing that scared me too, I remember this, I was like, what the F, right?
Yeah.
They were like, this isn't gonna be your only business. If you're
Yeah.
gonna be an entrepreneur, this isn't gonna be your only thing. You're gonna keep growing. And I remember thinking, what? Like I've put so many eggs into this basket. Like you're telling me that there's a lot more to it than this. My engineering mind had like almost exploded. And so, but it was some of the best lessons that I got in realizing, that they've all struggled and they've all felt like, maybe they weren't worthy. And they just kept telling me, just keep going, just show up, freaking show up, show up, show up. And that was it. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, I mean, I look back on that now, I'm like, man, that was it seems so basic, but it was like, advice that was just on point and perfectly timed for me.
Definitely. And it's great that you had a mentor that you could look to
Mhm.
kind of tell you what to do and what to expect.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize and it was actually like she shared with me. It wasn't like I went to her asking because I did feel like an imposter. I was like, I came from a very, successful position in the corporate job. Like I felt it was so difficult for me to ask for help because I was so used to being like the authority. And then when she started sharing with me like her struggles, I was like, oh, like okay, so I can share with you now. It was like safe to share with her. I didn't have like the comfort, or I don't know, maybe it was even the confidence, to share that I was struggling. And I think that even to this day, like I always feel like, because I am a high achiever and I want to always do well, there's like a thing in my mind that I do tell myself this too, is like oftentimes I don't like to entertain negative thought because I feel like that energy is going to be put out. And like I'm really a strong believer in the energy that you put out is what you're going to attract. And
Mhm.
so, it's a little bit of a battle because I don't like to talk negative because I don't want to attract the negative. So I'll like just kind of like put that aside and just like work through it. But at the same
Yeah,
time, like you're saying, like it's important to talk and kind of be real and just kind of deal with these struggles because we all struggle at some point or another.
definitely. And it's kind of funny because I'm like the exact opposite. Like I always think of, okay, worst case scenario. what could happen and what do I do?
Uh-huh. So
Like
you're engineer at heart.
yeah. But I mean, it's like, I don't, I try my best not to, talk negatively. But
Mm.
definitely inside my mind, I'm like thinking, okay, worst case scenario, what could happen?
Yeah.
That's the overthinker
Mm-hmm.
in me, definitely. But what's so funny is something that we haven't mentioned
What's
is
that?
I felt like an imposter when we first started this podcast.
Right?
But I think what really helped is going through it with someone,
Yeah.
right? I
It
feel like
is.
going through it with you, it's like, okay, we're both beginners. We're
Mm-hmm.
both getting into this together. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, I guess I felt at one point, I was like, who am I? Freaking podcast host? Like,
What the hell do I have to say?
right? But I think it
Yeah.
was just going through it with someone where you can talk through it and you're like going through the same
Mhm.
experience really helped. At least it helped me.
Yeah.
I know.
I know, and because we were like at the, like the heart of this, right, is like you and I, we have this desire to help other women because we know what it felt like. We know what it feels like. And we know what it feels like when you do have a community of women that's supportive and that can share these like war stories and that you can come out of it. Like you can actually get past these crazy things that feel like it's going to just like stop you dead in your tracks. You can actually get through it. And having a community, it makes it hell of a lot easier. But it's just one of those things. Like we all feel that. It's like we feel like somehow we're not worthy, that what we have to say or do is just not, I don't know, gonna be valued until you're bringing up the podcast. We had such amazing feedback, and when we hear that, we're like, right, like, how did it make you feel when I was sharing with you all that feedback that we were getting? It's like,
I
oh
literally
shit.
wanted to cry when you told me about your client who was like, I listen to it every morning. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not every morning because we do one once a week, but
Yeah.
she's like, oh, I listened to it on my way to work. And I was like,
Yeah.
I like read that and I like wanted to cry because I was like, oh my gosh, she freaking loves it. That's
I
great.
know. See, so it
Yeah.
kind of reaffirms for us, right? Like, okay, we do have something that's valuable to share, and that we're, sharing it with the purpose, right, of helping and being of service to other women, so that we can all rise up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it's like we're going to talk about the 5 ways to get over imposter syndrome, but I know
Yes.
that there is a lady, Dr. Valerie Young, who is the co-founder of Imposter Syndrome Institute, and she talks about the 5 different, what is it? 5 different
Like ways,
imposter
method.
syndrome people.
Oh, like people who suffer from imposter syndrome, like how to basically combat it, type of thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
But there's 5 different, you were gonna talk about the 5 different imposter
Oh,
syndromes,
yes, that's
right?
okay. Sorry, I didn't get that cue.
Yeah.
It's like could have been a little bit more obvious, right? Like if any more obvious, it would like bop me in the head. But
Right?
no, you're right. There was like 5 different types of
Types of imposter
imposter
syndrome.
syndrome, which is like
Yeah.
I had no idea. And anyway, we don't want to bore you with all the details about these types, but there are 5 types. And then basically when we were talking about it, we basically realized that this is it's a kind of describing when we hold ourselves to this unrealistic level of perfection, that anything other than being perfect, you're an imposter. And so for me, when I went through the different 5, of different imposter syndrome, there was one called the superhero. And basically the superhero just basically means that they often excel due to extreme effort. And so anything short of that, of excelling, right, you feel like you're being an imposter. Like whether you feel like
Mhm.
you have to be a super mom or a super entrepreneur, or like with me, I feel like, I'm always trying to strive and drive at the same time, like doing all these things. And if I fall short of that in my mind, then I feel like I'm not, like holding up my end of what is it? Holding my end of the stick, the end of the what's that term? My end of the whatever, my end of the
Yeah.
bargain. It's like I'm not holding up my end. I'm not pulling my own weight.
Yeah.
And I can't see past the fact that this perfection, or this goal of being some kind of perfect person, is just unreal. It's unrealistic and unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the superhero, which
Hmm.
you feel like you are. I know
Yes,
there's the perfectionist.
there's the perfectionist, so that kind of
Okay.
ties in with that. There is the expert, so the person who feels like they have to be the expert at everything, right? And anything
Uh-huh.
short of that is like no go. There is
Okay.
the natural genius. So the
Hmm.
natural genius feels like, they can learn new skills easily, and if they don't, like what's up with that? They can't like, deal with that. And then
Yeah.
the soloist, the person who's like like they call it the rugged individualist, like they prefer to work alone, they can't ask for help easily. I mean, I think so. When you think about these different titles, I think a lot of people can say, hey, I have a little bit of all those things.
I know. I'm trying to think of like, which one would mine be? And it's like, I feel like I'm like a little bit of like three different ones.
Yeah. And I think that when they look at these different types, I mean, yeah, they describe them by category, but when you see that you kind of fit into maybe several of them, I think that's
Yeah.
when you and I were saying, hey, it's really just when we hold ourselves to this unrealistic level of perfection, that we
Yeah.
feel like anything short of that we're no good.
Or that people are, or other people are going to think that we're no good.
That's right. That other people are going to see that like we're no good. We're not, or somehow we're not worthy of any kind of achievement of in that area that we might be thinking of, or somehow it's just like a fluke that we've gotten this far type thing. It's like in our own head, that self-defeating, thought process. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's really interesting. I had no idea that there was these five types of imposter syndrome. I don't know, like models.
Yeah. I would say I probably fall into the last one, the solo one,
The
because it's
soloist.
extremely hard for me to ask for help. Because
Yeah.
also too, I am very I feel like I'm very good at problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can't figure it out, it it bugs the crap out of me. So asking someone for help and asking someone to show me, hey, can you show me how to do
Mm-hmm.
this? I cannot stand that because
Yeah.
then
So
I feel like they think that I'm dumb when I'm like, I'm not dumb.
yeah.
So I'm constantly trying to like prove to myself and other people that I'm actually a very smart person. Because a lot of people think I'm dumb, and it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. So then
I'm
you're part
actually
natural.
really smart.
Yeah. Then you're like, hey, so you're part the natural genius, right? The one that's like masters many new skills, and
Yeah,
then they feel ashamed when faced with a goal that they
yeah,
can't get to, or it's harder.
that one and the perfectionist. I would say I like those three. I feel very
Yep.
much.
I mean, when I read through those, the expert, the perfectionist, the natural genius, the soloist, the superhero, I was like, yeah, I've probably been guilty of one of those five at some
Yeah,
point or another, or all five, depending on the situation. And I think for me, like one of the things that really helped me get past a lot of the self-defeating or self-limiting thought was just kind of humbling myself and realizing, like, okay, if the tables were flipped, like whether it was if I flipped them with you or flipped them with someone else that I respect, and they came to me with some of the issues that, let's say, if I had them and or they had the same issues that I had, how would I respond to them if they came to me with these things?
yeah,
And I realized I was like, oh, I would help them if I could, and I wouldn't judge them, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And that kind of reassured me that, okay, like just chill, like relax a little bit about this and kind of let that go, and it's okay to be kind of humble, I guess, and
yeah.
realize that it's okay not to not know everything or not be like the expert or the superhero or the all of that, the
Yeah.
soloist, all of that. You don't have to be those things or
And I
all
think
those things.
Yeah. And I think that people just knowing that this is an actual feeling that is a normal feeling,
Hmm.
or those different types, like knowing that there's different types of imposter syndrome and knowing that you can kind of fall into one of those, categorizing, it kind of makes you feel a little bit better knowing that, like, okay, so this is an actual feeling that people feel on a pretty regular basis.
Right.
It happens to high achievers. It happens to everybody.
Hmm.
So once again, I think just knowing that this is something that happens and that it's a very common thing,
Hmm.
you're kind of like, okay, like
Yeah.
that makes me feel a little bit better. But I
Right.
definitely think that if any of our listeners really are truly struggling with it, I know that Dr. Valerie Young does have a book, and it's called What's it called? The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women.
Yes.
Um, so, and like I said, she's the co-founder of Imposter Syndrome, of the Imposter Syndrome Institute. So clearly she knows what she's talking about. So if you
Mhm.
guys feel like you need, like that's a resource people can kind of go to, if you really feel like you want to kind of get more into it, then
Yeah.
definitely read that book. I haven't read it, but I'm sure it's great.
Yeah, no, it's really informative. And like I said, reading through just those types, those 5 types that she sort of spells out, is
Yeah.
helpful in and of itself. And I think like when we talk about it, I think the goal also is to help people move past it, right? So there's also the things that she shares as far as what you can do and the very specific ways. I think there's the 5 ways to kind of combat this kind of thought process that you might have about yourself and how to move past it. I don't know,
Yeah.
should we get to that part?
Yeah, yeah, we can definitely start talking about the 5 different ways that we found that could help. Do you want to start?
Sure. So,
Okay.
all right, drum roll. So we've got 5, and I think if we have time, right? I think we have time. We'll
Yeah.
end with like a little bit of homework for people. We can give them a little bit of a task that they can try this out. But the first way to help combat imposter syndrome is to basically list your strengths and your achievements. Make a list of all those things. And it's really to highlight the fact that that you've made these achievements and these accomplishments and they're real. And I think a lot of times with being or having imposter syndrome is like you're not even taking credit for those things, like or you've somehow it just like you've forgotten them or just not giving them as much weight, compared to like the self-doubt that you have about yourself. So making and identifying your strengths and accomplishments is a start. Like literally just sit down with a journal, kind of list out the things that, like with me, when I first start off as a nutritionist, maybe like, listen, I'm certified. I've got a master's in this and I have bachelor's in this and all these different things that I, have X amount of years of experience and, XYZ. And I was like, oh, if I did that, maybe that would have helped combat struggling with feeling like I was, moving on or struggling with the thought of moving on to a whole new profession.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, also too, like celebrating your wins,
Mhm.
celebrating your wins, celebrating your own accomplishments and kind of like giving yourself a pat on the back.
Right.
It really helps to kind of build the confidence to know, okay, that
Mhm.
you do deserve to celebrate, what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the second way, to get over imposter syndrome is you
Yes.
want to talk to a friend or a mentor.
Mhm.
You want to definitely share, all of your feelings about, how you're feeling about imposter, how you feel like an imposter. And
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, we've kind of covered this over, the time that we've been on here,
Yeah.
is being able to express how you're feeling and getting the confirmation back that
Mhm.
that's normal and that even if a mentor has even felt that way too
Mhm.
is definitely a great way. So because if you're kind of just struggling in your own head and you're
Yeah.
not talking to anybody about it, it's, and especially someone who you really trust or someone that who you really admire, I think that that's going to really, you're going to really struggle and you're going to continue to struggle with imposter syndrome if you
Right.
don't talk about it. So that's
Yeah.
definitely a good, that's a good step.
Yeah. I mean, I know for my like a personal experience, the moment or the times that I've reached out and talked to someone and just been kind of humble with it, right? Just kind of, hey, this is kind of how things are. It's always helped. It's always helped me out. It's always helped me see the light if it felt like I didn't have any light, and get past it all. So yeah, I love that one. That's a great
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
All right. So the third way is to, and this is a great one for so many reasons, right? But taking action and setting, achievable goals for yourself, and then basically just, taking the action to work towards those things. Because the more that you just take action, even if it's like the little things, it helps you to build confidence in whatever it is that you're struggling with. So, like, with the podcast, I know for us, it was like, okay, we're going to set the dates that we're going to tape these because it's going to force us to show up and tape these episodes. And I know the more that we do them, we become comfortable, we become more confident. It's just like a natural flow. But if we didn't do that, if we didn't set those goals for ourselves, it would have been like, we would have been sitting here being like, I really should be doing a podcast one day.
Mhm.
And then it never happens, right? Or we just continue to like, second guess ourselves or doubt ourselves that we're even able to do it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that not having something to work towards,
Mm-hmm.
not having a direction can definitely lower your confidence in like, okay,
Right.
where am I even going? So take, like writing down goals and writing down,
Mm-hmm.
your next steps that you're going to be doing is I think super important. Um,
Right.
Step 4 that we're going to get into is you want to practice some self-care.
Mm.
I definitely think that, exercising, journaling, meditation, things like that can really reduce your stress. Even
Mm-hmm.
like kind of getting into the habit of drinking more water and doing
Yeah.
more things for yourself can once again build that confidence
Yes.
to kind of make you really realize that you do deserve good things and you do deserve to take care of yourself and you deserve your accomplishments and
Mm.
your wins and everything that that you have kind of coming to you because you work hard and a lot of people work hard and people don't realize it. So
Yeah.
practicing some self-care.
Yeah. That sounds so like basic, but this is probably one that I will share. I am the worst at. And this is, I think, feeds into this. And it's exactly this. So if I feel that somehow I'm falling short, right, then I don't deserve to take the time to like give myself some rest, do some self-care. A lot of times it's because I'm making myself, it's like part of a routine. But internally, I actually struggle with it a little bit because I'm feeling like, okay, well, if I didn't excel the way I know I should, that judgmental word, then I can't treat myself because I'm not worthy. And I catch myself doing that. And it's such a kind of like this vortex that can just keep going if you don't like check yourself and realize like, wait, like hold up. If I go through like the list that we had so far and kind of list my accomplishments, list my achievements and all those things, and I know I'm working on goals, I know I'm taking all these steps, I am being diligent, like the hell, I can take a little bit of time to breathe and sort of like recover so I don't get burnt out. I mean, you and I just literally talked about that's my thing is burnout. And it's, I think, tied to this and kind of dealing
Definitely.
with this sometimes. So yeah, I love that one. Well, I personally can relate to that one big time.
It's funny. I could tell that when I was talking about it, you looked at me through the camera where I was like, I feel like I'm speaking directly to you, Barbara. Like I can see that it is resonating with
Oh
you
my God. I'm
big
like that.
time.
Yeah. Oh, big time. And it's so interesting because, as a coach, that's what I'm, preaching with a lot of my clients. And I think this is the good part or the blessing in going over stuff like this, that sometimes you feel like, oh, well, these are problems that people have or problems or things that people struggle with. But the beauty that comes out of it is that like we realize we're just human and it's okay. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect. We can help each other. We can help each other improve and step up, level up, and it's all good. And
Yeah.
and even for me, like I feel like these are things I'm constantly learning too. And so this is great to do it in this platform, I think, with you and then with, all of this community that we're building. I think it's amazing. So yeah. Anyway, not to short you though, there is one more. There's 5. So
There's
this is
one more.
there's one
Yes.
more. So the fifth way to combat imposter syndrome is to do a reframe. So if you kind of think about the first one where we talked about listing your achievements and your accomplishments, well, this one is like reframing like the negative self-talk. So for example, if I, were to let's say receive some positive feedback, a lot of times if you're suffering or you're dealing with imposter syndrome, like you hear this positive feedback, but then in your head you discredit it, like, well, but it was easy. You somehow like you discredit the positive feedback that's given to you. And so this reframe basically talks about how, to flip it, basically flip that negative and turn it more into like a positive. Actually, like swap it out with the positive as far as like, actually, yeah, I did work hard on this and I'm proud of myself for following through with this tough challenge, as opposed to like poo-pooing it and be like, oh, it's okay, it was no big deal, right? Really just
Mhm.
flipping the switch, turning it that negative kind of self-talk, and then thinking more of the positive opposite to that, or the positive take on that.
Definitely. And not giving yourself enough credit.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, I mean, you cannot like when you're getting into something new, you could say like if it's getting kind of frustrating or you know are kind of feeling these negative thoughts, you could just be like, gosh, like instead of going, God, like I don't know what I'm doing, you could literally just reframe it into saying, okay, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I don't know how to do
Nice.
this yet.
Yeah.
So definitely even just adding in that extra
Mm.
word can really help to kind of just reframe any of those negative thoughts coming in.
I like that. In fact, I actually have to use that for my clients too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Or like you're like, oh gosh, I have to work out. You say, you know what? I get to work out today. I'm excited.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
like kind of like affirmations.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and it's one of these things that just like anything that's worthy, it takes constant work. And not to say that you're going to be struggling for your whole life, but it takes you being mindful and thoughtful about it, right? We have to kind of put effort into it. The effort we put in is the results that we get out. Um, oh, and so I don't want to forget. So there's or a
Yeah.
homework thing for you if you want to give this a try and really take this whole challenging imposter syndrome to the next level. So this homework assignment, I actually found this from that study that was in 1978 from the Georgia State University. And this is just one of the, they call it like the different modalities that they use to sort of kind of, I don't want to say treat them, but kind of help these women deal with the imposter phenomenon. So this example of what to do, this homework assignment, and I actually wrote it down, is that they wanted these ladies to keep a record of all the different like positive feedback that they would get, right? So like in a journal, they would write down the positive feedback that they would receive. And they also had to know the thoughts or the things that were keeping, each of these ladies from accepting this positive feedback. So for example, kind of like what we said, like the reframe, right? So you get positive feedback and then you don't really accept it because you feel like, well, I'm really not an expert at what I do. Or I'm really just new at this. I'm new. And so I really don't, I can't accept that feedback for what it is. Or, I don't make as much money as some of these other coaches or, whatever. All those different things that keep you from accepting this positive feedback. And then after that, once you realize all these different things that you do to sort of like negate that positive feedback, is then they want you to sort of like be aware of that. But then as you start receiving, more positive feedback, to stop, to really listen, and then to like, if you catch yourself kind of going back to that negative sort of thought process, is then to, like you were saying, to reframe, to like, no, I'm going to reframe with the positive, and really accept and use this positive feedback as like a nurturing kind of like source for me. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically just kind of journaling,
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
journaling your negative thoughts throughout the day. Right. And
Mhm.
then, reframing it into something more positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess because they said for some people, they're not even aware of what they're doing. Like that negative sort of reaction to positive feedback. So a lot of times they're saying like they just didn't even realize that they would do it. It was kind of like a natural thing, right? So they would list
Yeah.
out the positive, kind of list out what they were doing to negate it, and then being aware of the fact that, okay, no, this is what I'm going to do to accept it, and just become more aware of it and kind of like work themselves literally like write it out, just like journaling, like you said, journaling, whether it's for weight loss or, things like that. Things you write out, you become hyper aware of for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that it comes super naturally. I mean, I'm sure I do. I think I actually do that all the time, right? Like I get done with someone's hair and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love it. You're so good at what you do." And I'm like, "Oh, I try." And it's like, "No, actually, yeah, over the 10 years of doing hair, I'm actually really good at what I do."
Yeah. Oh, I remember something specifically, and I don't know if this is what you were doing, but I think I was complimenting you on something like how organized you were and your thought process about organizing everything. And I think you might have made a comment like that, like, I try, or something like that. And I said
Yeah.
something like, hey, girl, own that. because that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that just comes so naturally to me that I'm just
Mhm.
like, I'm just
Own
like, oh,
it.
actually, yeah, I actually am really good at organization.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
even like when we prep for these, I'm like, thank God for you.
I need to not be so humble.
Mhm. Right? Yeah. Yeah. It's like just, hell, being confident in what you're good at. That doesn't mean, that you're arrogant. That just means that you know that you're good at what you're good at. And
Yeah.
that's good too.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
anyway, this was a great freaking episode. I love this topic. I love how we talked through it, how we shared our own our own skeletons, if you want to call them skeletons, I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
and even just the thought or the tips on how to work through it. I think that's the huge nugget for a lot of people out of this episode for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So just to kind of recap for you guys, if you want to like write it down or something. So
Yeah.
the first thing that you guys want to do when you're trying to kind of fight these negative feelings is first you want to identify all of your achievements and your accomplishments. You want to write all of your goals down. You guys want to
Mhm.
celebrate your wins. The
Yeah.
second thing that you want to do is you want to talk to people. You want to talk to friends. You want to talk to mentors about your feelings and see that, it's a perfectly normal thing. You also want to take action. You want to write out goals. You want to have direction in what you're
Mhm.
doing. You want to practice self-care is the fourth one. Taking time, Barbara, for
Yeah.
yourself and
Exactly.
really just doing stuff for yourself and building that self-confidence. And
Mhm.
then last but not least, you want to reframe your negative thoughts. So
Yeah.
anytime you're thinking of anything negative, any negative thought that comes into your mind, you want to catch yourself and you want to reframe it.
Yeah.
So I
That's
definitely
awesome.
think that these are some great tips that people can use because honestly, I think it's way more common than people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think that talking about it helps normalizing it too, right? Just that you're not some kind of freak if you feel this way or somehow you're not good enough or whatever, any of that kind of like negative self-talk. So yeah, these are definitely some helpful tips. There's certain things here that I use for sure daily. I've used in the past. They've helped me tremendously. And yeah, I mean, if you find this episode or if you enjoy this episode, we'd love for you to share it with other people that you think would benefit from it too. I mean, share, like, subscribe. We're on all the major platforms for podcasts. We're on YouTube. You can actually follow us on Instagram too. So if nothing else, follow us, and we can continue to help you work through a lot of these other challenges, as an entrepreneur, as a woman, and all of that stuff.
Definitely. So thank you guys for coming on here and listening. And really, I just want to congratulate you guys for taking the time out you guys could have been doing anything else with your time, but you're clearly wanting to better yourself and learn and grow. And you're not an imposter for that.
Oh
So
yeah, I
I'm
love
proud of
it.
you. Yes.
Yay, I'm proud of you too.
All right, guys. Well, this was a great one, and on to the next one.
On to the next. We'll see ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.